Today we're unboxing a brand new iPhone X that's been sealed in its box for over 7 years. So this was Apple's 10th anniversary iPhone released back in 2017. And this device is widely regarded as being peak iPhone. So I was really excited when I saw this sealed model come up for sale for less than $250 on eBay. Taking a closer look at the packaging here, you'll see that the display on the iPhone is the main star on the box. And this was very fitting as this was the first iPhone with an edge-to-edge display. And something pretty interesting is that the date on this box, Tuesday, September 12th, is actually the date in 2017 when this iPhone was announced. On the back of the box here, we do see that I have a 64GB model in the silver color. And this generation of iPhone box has a plastic pull tab here. Also, I did check the serial number with Apple to confirm that this device has never been activated. And yes, I do realize that breaking the seal on this device will destroy a lot of its value. But I'm just not the type of collector that would want to keep a sealed iPhone. I'd rather open it up and enjoy it. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and pull this tab now. And with that, the rest of this seal just lifts straight upward. Let's get this lid pulled off now. And alright, we are actually met with a literature packet right off. And after removing that, we do see the iPhone X curiously with a few smudges on the display. I also found a few smudges on the brand new iPhone 11 Pro I unboxed a few weeks ago. So that's definitely a little bit interesting, but the iPhone looks really flawless otherwise. So now I'll use this pull tab to lift the device up. And here we go, the iPhone X is looking absolutely stunning. I'm super glad to have the silver model here as I think that one looks the absolute best. The mirrored finish on this stainless steel is just so impressive. So let's get this plastic film removed now. And there we go. I always love how satisfying that sound is. I'm already getting the stainless steel band here really smudged up, but it's hard to convey just how beautiful this iPhone X design is. Let's get it connected to power and see if it will accept a charge. And there we go, we do get the battery charging screen. So that's a great sign. I will put the iPhone to the side now and give it some time to charge up. And while the iPhone is charging up, let's take a look at these accessories. So for the literature packet, it looks like we have a quick start guide, as well as some warranty info and 2 Apple stickers. And the quick start guide for this iPhone was really important as you were interacting with it in all new ways. So you had an explanation here for Face ID as well as the gesture-based UI. We also have a set of earpods here. These had a lightning connector and Apple was still including the lightning to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter, as Apple had just eliminated the headphone jack with the iPhone 7 1 year prior. So this was really still necessary as users were transitioning to wireless audio. We also have a small 5-watt USB-A power adapter here as well as a USB-A to lightning cable. So this iPhone really came from an era where you were taken care of in the accessories department. Okay, well it's been a few hours now and I now have the iPhone X fully charged up. I had it connected to a 20-watt power adapter. It powered up after being connected for only a couple of minutes and it took around 3 hours to reach 100%. So now we'll go through the setup process here. This device should definitely be running iOS 11. And I think it's going to be a pretty late version of iOS 11 because this device was actually produced in July of 2018. So let's swipe up to open now. And this is pretty cool. iOS 11 was actually the first version that had this quick start feature in the setup menu. But I decided to set up this device manually. And okay, it looks like we got through activation. This device is actually factory unlocked, so it was really nice that I didn't have to install a SIM card. The setup here is also instructing us how to use the gesture-based UI. And there we go, we are met with the iOS 11 home screen. And we also see a notification to update to iOS 16, which I will definitely not be doing. And the first thing I want to do with this device is check out the About section in Settings. And there we go, we can see that this device is running iOS version 11.4. So that's the second to last iOS 11 version, with the very last being 11.4.1. Something else I want to do while I'm here in Settings is check out the battery health. So battery health was actually new for the later versions of iOS 11. And it is noted as being in its beta phase. But we do see 100% as the maximum capacity here. And that's consistent with every sealed iOS device that I have unboxed. I've definitely gotten really lucky with that, but every battery on a sealed device I've unboxed has performed just like brand new. And I usually wait until later in the video to check out the wallpaper selection, but the iPhone X has some really cool exclusive live wallpapers that I am dying to check out. So we'll go straight into those now. So you have a selection of 9 live wallpapers here, 6 of which were exclusive to this iPhone X. These first 2 here were featured on the boxes of the device. So the first one here was used on the box of the Space Gray model. And there you can see the really cool live animation when using the 3D touch feature. And in case you weren't aware, the 3D touch feature is basically a pressure sensitive layer in the display. So tapping and applying extra force causes them to animate. This second option here, as you can see on the box, was used for the silver model. And once again, there is the rest of that animation. There was also a third option here that was not used on the box of any device, as it only came in those 2 colors. And here is the animation on that one. There were 3 more options here that were added in iOS 11.2. And I believe some of these were used in commercials for the iPhone X. So here's what the first one looks like. The second. And the third. These last 3 options aren't too exciting, as these were present starting on the iPhone 6s. But these top 6 choices are probably my favorite live wallpapers on any iOS device. And for this silver unit I have here, I think I'm going to go with this option that matches the box. And there's how that looks. Let's take a look at the live effect on the lock screen. So now let's talk about what the iPhone X was. As I mentioned, this iPhone was announced in September 2017, just over 10 years after the original iPhone. But this iPhone didn't actually ship until November of 2017. It was announced alongside the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. And these were the first iPhones to be announced in Apple's new Steve Jobs Theater. While the iPhone 8 model stuck with a really traditional iPhone design, the iPhone X brought something all new. So there was no longer a home button, and the display bezels were significantly smaller. There was now this dip at the top of the display that would come to be known as a notch. And this housed many components that allowed for the new Face ID feature. And that was Apple's new facial recognition feature that replaced Touch ID. And although there were a few drawbacks to Face ID, namely being a little bit slower than Touch ID, I think we can all agree how revolutionary it is and was. Another new aspect of the iPhone X design was the use of stainless steel. Apple had not used stainless steel on an iPhone since the iPhone 4S back in 2011. But the stainless steel on this iPhone X here had a mirrored finish. You could either get the silver model here with bare stainless steel, or you could get the space gray model which had a painted stainless steel. And both of these colors were really nice, although it was a little bit strange that Apple did not offer a gold model. But just having the black and white model here did feel kind of fitting. I feel like that's what Steve Jobs would have wanted for the 10th anniversary iPhone. So getting back to the display on this iPhone, this was an OLED or organic LED panel. And that was really cool because every previous iPhone had used an LCD display, so Apple was beginning to lag behind their competition. So this display measured 5.8 inches diagonally with a resolution of 2435 by 1125. It had a really high pixel density with 458 pixels per inch. And one of the best things about this OLED display was the true black levels that it could produce. And since there was no home button, you could now just tap the display to wake the device. And instead of double-clicking the home button to access multitasking, you would now swipe up and pause. Although a really strange quirk of this iPhone X on iOS 11 is that you can't simply swipe upward on the app to close it. Doing that just simply will take you back to the home screen. So to actually close out the application, you have to hold down on it till you get this red minus button and then swipe upward. Apple removed that extra step in iOS 12 as it was just really not necessary. Also, due to there being no home button on the iPhone X, the lock button was now renamed the side button, as you could now hold down on this to access Siri. And to power the device off, you now had to hold down the side button and the volume button. And you could tap those buttons once to do a screenshot. And lastly, for the UI changes, you could now access the control center by swiping down on the top right. Also, a few more points about Face ID here on the iPhone X. Apple advertised this biometric login as being significantly more secure than Touch ID. So according to them, by using Face ID, there was only a 1 in 1 million chance that someone else could get into your iPhone. And that chance was 1 in 50,000 with Touch ID. And at the keynote event for this iPhone, the very first demo of Face ID actually failed. So that was definitely pretty embarrassing for Apple at the time. But Face ID was enabled by a system that Apple called the True Depth camera. And that was comprised of an infrared camera, a flood illuminator, the front-facing camera, and a dot projector. This iPhone X was powered by Apple's new A11 Bionic chip. And that was a 6-core chip clocked at 2.4 gigahertz. And this was the first Apple Silicon chip to include their in-house designed GPU. It was paired to 3 gigabytes of RAM, so this was a really powerful iPhone. It only received an average amount of software support though through iOS 16 in 2022. Although that version is still quite usable as it received a security update in 2025. Another neat addition for the iPhone X was the inclusion of Qi wireless charging. And that was enabled by the glass back panel here, which was also present on the iPhone 8. This iPhone was actually announced with a product that would never be released called AirPower. And that was basically a charging mat for your iPhone as well as your AirPods and Apple Watch. Apple kept pushing the release back until the project was eventually just canceled. The battery life on the iPhone X was quoted to be around 2 hours longer than what the iPhone 7 had. But it definitely didn't have as strong of battery life as the iPhone 8. This iPhone featured 2 vertically stacked cameras. So the wide angle and telephoto lens were both 12 megapixel sensors. And for the first time, they both featured optical image stabilization. One huge aspect of the iPhone X that you cannot ignore was its price. So this was the first $1,000 iPhone. It launched at a price of $999, which was definitely a sticker shock back in 2017. Of course, though, that pricing strategy would become more accepted over time. And this general iPhone hovering around the $1,000 price is what would eventually become the Pro model iPhone. Also, I wanted to mention how the iPhone X name was a bit confusing. So obviously to Apple enthusiasts, it made sense that this was called the iPhone X being the 10th anniversary model. But Apple's decision to use the Roman numeral X in place of 10 was a bit confusing for the average consumer. So a good majority of consumers were definitely out there calling this the iPhone X. And now let's turn our attention to the software version on this iPhone with iOS 11. So iOS 11 is not very highly regarded. It was a pretty buggy and unstable release. And there were quite a few visual changes to this version. So there were new icons for apps like the App Store and iTunes Store, as well as Maps and Camera. Also, the applications in your dock now did not have labels. Also, the lock screen was now merged with the Notification Center. The Files app on this version was new, and there was now a new one-handed keyboard function. And the control center was now new in this version. It took up your full screen. And you could 3D touch on these little platters for some extra options. This control center look is still really similar to what we use today, but here's what it looked like in the previous version, iOS 10. The iPhone X on iOS 11 had the Animoji feature using the Face ID technology. And lastly, we'll take a look at the rest of those wallpapers that were included here on iOS 11. So this dynamic category had launched with iOS 7, but this specific set of them was new for the iPhone X. And these featured dots that would move according to the tilt of your device. But they now included a black background, which was really great for showing off the black levels on this OLED display. And for the stills category here, I believe these were all new except for 2. So the only two carryovers here would be the green wave default from iOS 10 as well as this blue sand from iOS 9. A good amount of these wallpapers were meant to be a throwback, so this globe image was the default wallpaper on the original iPhone. And these images near the bottom were a throwback to the old Apple logo. I think the live wallpapers on this device though are definitely the standouts. So that pretty much concludes my look at this brand new iPhone X that's been sealed in its box since 2018. But I just couldn't end the video without comparing to the original iPhone. These two iPhones really are the most significant models that Apple ever released, with the original here implementing the bar form factor as well as the home button and multi-touch technology. And the 10 here bringing an edge-to-edge display with gestures and Face ID. So leave me a comment below with your thoughts on this iPhone X and whether or not you agree that this is peak iPhone. Also, be sure to get subscribed for more sealed iOS device content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.